Time to clean out the filth. My name is Richard. I used to be an agent, a man who had seen enough to stop taking people at their word. Now I am just a middle-aged man living in a respectable suburban house with a wife, a daughter, and a swarm of doubts buzzing in my head every night. Gloria, beautiful, ambitious, always buttoned up, even in a bathrobe. She works for one of those men whose last name alone makes him richer. His name, brace yourselves, is Maxwell Clayton Sterling III. Yes, with a Roman numeral trailing behind, like a pedigreed dog. He gives interviews, smiles from billboards, and is preparing for the Senate, maybe even higher. He even has a slogan, America, strong again. Strong, right? Especially when their pockets are stitched from oil and narcotics. And I have my Claire, my daughter. She is 15, and there is more truth in her eyes than in the entire campaign Sterling is running. Gloria has been staying out more and more. Business trips, meetings, urgent late-night calls. All of it sounds like a cheap one-man play for a gullible fool. But I am no fool. I am a former agent. And when someone tries to play spy games under my roof, my hands start itching to plant microphones. So this time, when Gloria once again went to a conference in Seattle, I already knew where she would be. I knew exactly where and how to set up the cameras, to miss neither a sigh, nor a smile, nor a lie. And Claire went to spend the night at her friend Olivia's. I was even relieved. Tonight she would not see what her mother really was. I got to the hotel first, rented the room opposite, set up everything, sound, video, a cup of coffee, a laptop, silence. I waited. He entered the room as if he owned the world. White shirt, a watch worth more than my house, and a smile like that of an insurance salesman who already knows he will cheat you. Gloria came in a minute later. She wore nothing but her business suit and hypocrisy. I watched. Your little husband at home again with the kid? Sterling sneered, grabbing her waist. M.H.M., she answered, kissing him with a hunger I had not seen in years. He thinks I'm fighting for the budgets of poor neighborhoods. Poor fool. They drank wine. They laughed. They spoke of me, of Claire, of people. They called my daughter a stupid doll, and me a mutt losing his sense of smell. This so-called hero from his past life, said Sterling, wiping his mouth after another kiss. He has no idea what I am moving through those ports. A year from now, 20 tons will flow through the country. The main thing is to become one of Washington's own. And the people, what about the people? The people are stupid. Give them a show and they will vote. You know that. That veterans video, pure vomit. Exactly. Let them sniff patriotism while I move the money. I sat still. Inside, fire burned. But I did not move. Because I did not want to just strike. I wanted to crush. Beautifully. Publicly. Forever. When she returned, with flowers, a gift, and feigned exhaustion, I greeted her as always. How was the trip? Tiring. Meetings, early mornings, she played her role to the detail. An actress. A naive bitch. Get some rest, I'll make coffee. She nodded, unaware that I had already written the final act of her play. Tomorrow would be the performance. The day arrived. The square. The press conference of the century. Gloria in white. On stage, Sterling, a statue of lies. Behind him on the huge screen, his slogan, America, strong again. Cameras, journalists, the crowd. I sat backstage. Mixer, projector, access to the screen. Everything, in a single click. I pressed it. The screen flickered. For a second, silence hung like before a storm. Then, the frame burst open. A crumpled bedsheet. Gloria. Maxwell. Sterling puffing like a hog at slaughter. Oh God, what is that? Someone screamed in the audience. The camera zoomed in. Gloria laughed. He isn't even a man. His daughter is just as empty. He thinks I'm with him out of love. Gloria's voice rang from the speakers. Sterling's eyes went dead as he stared at the screen. The crowd roared. We'll move this through veterans' funds. Sterling's recorded voice thundered. Someone threw a cup at the stage. Panic surged. What's happening? I heard an assistant cry. This is sabotage, shrieked a guard. But it was too late. The camera zoomed again, showing Sterling's face, then Gloria's. They scuttled across the stage like cockroaches on a frying pan. And the bright screen behind them still blazed with the slogan, America, strong again, making them look like living symbols of vulgarity, greed, and contempt. I stood and walked out. No shout. No words. Mission accomplished. Sterling had not fallen to a bullet. He had fallen to the truth. Beautifully. Loudly. Publicly. And Gloria? Let her explain to Claire why her mother had stood on that stage like a prostitute before a tribunal. Today I was no veteran. I was the court. After the press conference, Sterling and Gloria vanished as if blown away by the wind. Some said they fled to Latin America, others that they surrendered to the FBI under false names. Someone even joked Sterling had shed his skin and gone to Canada as a woman named Karen. I did not care. They were gone. That was enough. But the fallout from their disappearance was louder than their presence ever was. A disgraced Senate candidate, caught live with his pants around his ankles, was tied not only to infidelity, but to schemes so deep the mafia itself would choke on them. Politicians, judges, port authorities, pharmaceutical heads, even a few bishops, all woven into one net, a web of filth and dollars. Arrests began. One after another, television showed men in suits being escorted out, the same men who only yesterday called themselves defenders of the people. And I was making breakfast. Dad, you burned the bacon again. Claire frowned at the pan as though I had spoiled a masterpiece. Not bacon, but a cold crust with character. I muttered, sliding the plate toward her. Learn to appreciate the aftertaste of Armageddon. She smirked, but sat down to eat. We lived in a house outside the city, hidden by trees and a good surveillance system. After Gloria's video, I didn't tattoo Avenger on my chest, but something changed. I started sleeping with a pistol under my pillow. I started jogging again, not for health, but to measure how fast I could reach the nearest tree to take cover. Peace was deceptive. 2 weeks after the scandal, things quieted down. The press shifted to a new senator, and Sterling's name vanished from headlines. Only I knew, when a rat goes silent, it doesn't mean it left. It means it sharpens its teeth. Night came, as it always does, suddenly, but with character. It had rained all day, the kind of weather films use when someone dies in a hallway with a kitchen knife in his chest. I sat in an armchair, reading archived reports from old operations, sipping whiskey. Claire was already asleep. She liked falling asleep to the sound of rain, claiming it was soothing. On the camera feed, I saw the first shadow. Is that you, Bambi? I muttered, setting the glass aside. The camera caught movement at the back door, then at a window, then at the attic. So they've come. No invitations, no wine. Just waltzing in as if it's their place, I muttered, rising from the chair. I walked to the wall and opened the safe built into the drywall. From it, I pulled my old Glock and a rifle with a suppressor. For a second I considered taking a grenade. Then I remembered Claire was in the house and decided to keep it minimal. But instead of saying, "Sorry, honey, no fireworks tonight," what I said out loud was, "Tonight, no tricks. The surprise will come later." The first one slipped in silently through the kitchen window. He did not even have time to breathe in the smell of burnt bacon before the butt of my rifle smashed into his temple. "Welcome," I whispered, catching his body and lowering it carefully to the floor. "You could have at least taken off your shoes, you piece of filth." The next one came through the back door. I heard it creak and caught him in the hallway. "Hey, you here for Gloria?" I shot him in the knee, and he collapsed with a scream. "She isn't seeing anyone. Say hello to hell instead." The body hit the floor, and I already knew. There were many of them. Too many. Something fell downstairs. Most likely one of them had knocked into the counter. I slid into the shadows and held the trigger down. One dropped. Another cursed and dove into cover. I heard someone shout, "He's alone. He's alone, God damn it. Grab the girl and go." Oh, they had come for Claire. I burst into her room. She was already standing, trembling, with a can of pepper spray in one hand and a baseball bat in the other. "Dad, it's all right. Don't look. Stay close to me." "Is it them? Gloria?" Her voice was shaking. "Yes. They came to collect their tip for service rendered. But what they'll get is lead." I led her into the corridor, a swarm chasing after me. Agile, well-equipped. Not just mercenaries. Most likely Sterling's private army. Or what was left of it. I moved from cover to cover, just like on an old operation in Kabul. They tried to surround me, but I knew this house better than they knew their own wives. 3 jumped out of the bathroom. I put them all down before one of them even managed to fire. A bullet grazed the wall and ricocheted into the toaster. "Thanks. Now I don't have breakfast," I muttered, reloading. I could feel fatigue and rage creeping in. My hands moved on their own, my vision locked onto every step. Someone threw a smoke grenade. I reacted to the sound. A leap, a strike, a shot. Another shot. A body tumbled down the staircase like a sack of potatoes in tactical gear. But there were too many of them. A machine gun blasted through the wall from the window, ripping chunks out of the plaster. I dove behind the couch and pulled Claire into my arms. Run to the basement. There's a second exit. Lock it behind you and don't open for anyone, not even if I call. I'll come. Dad, I can't. That's an order. I barked. She flinched, then ran. I stayed behind. The last hallway was pure hell. I moved like an animal. I was no longer a father. I had become a machine. Growling, shooting, striking. One of them grabbed me from behind. I smashed him against the wall and used him as a shield against another burst of fire. Then I hurled his body into two more who jumped from the closet and finished them with the rifle butt. I could feel blood mixing with broken glass beneath my boots. The room was flooded with shadows and light from the street lamps outside. And in that moment I heard it. Claire's scream. I spun, bolted, ran. My rifle was empty. I hurled it into the nearest bastard's head and pulled out my knife. Let her go. I roared, bursting into the basement. One of them had her pinned against the wall. One more step, and she's dead. All right. I raised my hands. Just don't stain the carpet. It was expensive. He faltered, and that was enough for me to spring forward. The blade tore through his vest, but he managed to drag Claire back with him. I lunged after them. Dad, she screamed, struggling, his elbow pressing against her throat. I almost had him, and at that moment, a blow. Something heavy and blunt slammed into the side of my head. A flash of white-hot sparks, then darkness. I heard Claire calling for me, her voice receding, everything vanishing. Darkness. I came to slowly, as though someone was trying to drag me up from under frozen water. The headache pounded so viciously it felt like someone had installed a drum kit inside my skull and was holding rehearsals there. The air was thick, saturated with the metallic stench of blood and old meat. I tried to move, and then realized my hands were bound. Not just tied, but hooked onto a rusty meat hook dangling from a chain on the ceiling. My legs were tied too, hanging just above the floor. I felt like a side of beef, only without the price tag. Well, shit. Looks like morning has started, I muttered, laughing hoarsely. The space around me was gray, grim, with concrete walls stained with marks that could have been anything, old blood or ketchup from some careless butcher. The lamps buzzed, flickering now and then, as if they too were part of the torture show. And then I heard footsteps. Heavy, urgent, furious. Maxwell came first. Sterling, still in his suit, though wrinkled, tie crooked, face red as a beet, eyes bloodshot. He looked like an enraged hippo in an expensive jacket. His lips trembled, and I could see he was on the verge of losing control. You, he bellowed the instant he saw me. Bastard. You ruined everything. Everything. Damn you. I lifted my head as much as my muscles would allow. Maxwell, glad to see you're alive. I'd hoped you went down in a plane crash where you got to play pilot, whore, and in-flight meal all at once. He lunged toward me, face twisted. You think you're clever, don't you? You think you won? You think you're a hero? No, I smirked. I just happened to be a massive nuisance to the bastards who wanted to screw the country from behind. And without lube, I might add. A second voice came from the side. Cold, vile, and far too familiar. Richard, she said. I turned my head as much as I could. Gloria. Hair loose, lipstick smeared. Her face, not a face, but a grimace brought to life. A cocktail of pain, shame, and rage. A red mark on her cheek. Maxwell clearly did not spare even his allies. She wore an expensive jacket, borrowed, too large, as though even clothing refused to obey her anymore. You made me a laughingstock, she hissed through clenched teeth. You destroyed my career. I was thrown out of every foundation. They call me a whore on live television. You exposed us like clowns in a cheap porno. Because of you, I am nothing. You're mistaken, Gloria, I whispered. You were nothing long before I ever turned on a camera. Now everyone just knows it. She stepped closer. Her eyes burned. Foam at the lips. A circus of deranged hypocrisy. You know, Richard, she hissed, there are cameras here. Everything that happens next. I will watch it again. At night. With wine. To my favorite music. And you know what? It will be better than any anniversary we ever had. Oh, so you've become a cinephile? I rasped with a grin. Too bad the Academy doesn't hand out Oscars for amateur snuff films. You are no longer a husband, she spat. You are biological waste. And I want to watch it being processed. I laughed. My throat burned, my voice cracked, but I laughed. Right in the face of this mad creature teetering on the edge of her own moral collapse. Well then, I croaked. Glad I could give you such a colorful new hobby. Just don't forget to label the tape. Inspired by my personal degradation. Maxwell snapped. He roared and came closer. I saw his fist clench, and the next instant pain slammed into my ribs. Once. Twice. I coughed. Something cracked inside. Air fled my lungs like a thief. Now that's what I call an argument. I forced out between bloodied lips. You people do everything ass backwards. Your politics, your sex, your conversations. Maxwell stepped back. His face shifted, from fury to something strangely calm. He smiled. Not with his lips, but with his eyes. The very same eyes maniacs smile with when they find their victim in a dark alley. And now for the best part, he whispered. You're Claire. You're precious, clean, little Claire. My heart froze. Is no longer yours. We sold her, Richard. We sent her where she belongs. To a brothel. Where fat, sweaty, unwashed perverts will take her until they fuck her to death. Day after day. Night after night. How long do you think she will last? Silence hung heavy, like a great bell. I felt no pain. I felt no chains. Only rage. A rage so consuming it burned everything inside me to ashes. I will kill you, I said. What? I will kill you all. Every inch of your rotten flesh will be remembered. I will find Claire. I will tear your guts out. I will sit on your coffins, drink coffee, and tell the mosquitoes about your pathetic lives. Maxwell laughed. Blackmail or power, Richard. Either way I get what I want. And you? You're just meat. Hanging meat. Gloria ground her teeth and spat in my direction. Goodbye, darling. You will die the way you lived, without meaning. They left. I remained hanging. A draft swept through the slaughterhouse. Somewhere, water dripped. I whispered, barely hearing my own voice. Claire, hold on. Dad is coming. The factory filled once more with footsteps. Heavy, confident, the kind belonging to men who had long since stopped searching for meaning in life, because they were satisfied with the role of butchers. And there they were, two hulks, each the size of a refrigerator, with faces where intelligence had been replaced with malice. One was bald, with a scar running from temple to chin. The other had a ponytail, the kind most men lose before graduation. Both wore gloves, massive boots, and the cheerful mood of sadists. Look at that, rasped Scar, cracking his knuckles. Our souvenir hasn't died yet. Maybe we should help him, sneered Ponytail, rolling out a metal tray filled with toys, knives, darts, pliers. It seemed one of them had played too much Mortal Kombat and decided that living people were nothing more than meat with animations. Well then, hero, said Scar, stepping close. Wanted to save the world? You look like you've been hiding from it for 10 years already. Let's play. He threw the first dart. It sank into my shoulder as if I were a fairground target. The pain was sharp, but I only clenched my teeth. Do you even know how to aim? I rasped. I feel like a piano, and you are clearly not John Lennon. Funny, growled Ponytail. You won't be laughing once you're missing your teeth. The next dart, into my thigh, then into my stomach. Each strike tore flesh. Each hissed as though the very air of the factory suffered with me. But I remained silent. I waited. They weren't just throwing, they were enjoying it. Look, he doesn't even scream, Scar said. Maybe the blowtorch will make him talk. I heard the hiss of ignition. Its roar and the smell of scorched metal blended together. Soon after came the smell of burning skin. Hotter, hotter, whispered Ponytail, pressing the flame to my chest. I twisted, hissed, but I did not scream. He's silent, as though he's made of concrete. Let's try cutting. Concrete can be cut, can it? And then the blade. Not for killing. For humiliation. They opened my skin, leaving long, oozing gashes, like artists who care nothing for the canvas so long as the spectacle is gruesome. I felt blood running down my stomach, my legs. And they laughed. What if we cut off an ear? Suggested Scar. Piece by piece. It'll make a stylish trophy. But I remained silent. Still, my body screamed, but my mind it worked. Then they stopped. My head dropped forward. I became heavy and quiet, as if it was over. Is he dead? Said Ponytail, stepping closer. Hell if I know, muttered Scar. Wait, I'll check. He came nearer, leaned down. Reach for my neck. Let's see if there's a... At that moment, I shoved off him with my legs. With all my strength. His bulk staggered back, and I swung forward, kicking against the wall. I hit. Directly on the control panel. A click. The chain groaned and began to lower. I felt myself descending. A second. Another. And then, the fall. I crashed onto the concrete floor. My arms burned with pain, my muscles cramped. But I tore free of the ropes quickly. I was free. "Fuck," roared Scar. "Get up." The bastard broke loose. Ponytail already had his machete drawn. Shiny, broad, with a skull carved into the handle. "Now I'll chop you like a salad," he hissed. I saw it on the floor beside me, the fallen hook. The very one I had been hanging from. Heavy, razor sharp. I grabbed it and rose, staggering like a drunken demon. "Come on then, bastard." "Cut," I said. "But know this, the first one to greet you will be your mother." I promised her regards. He charged at me. I dodged, clumsy but enough. The machete sliced the air, striking the chain, sparks flying. I stepped forward and drove the hook into his throat. Cage, he gurgled. I ripped it free and rammed it in again, straight into his eye. He collapsed like a sack of rotting meat. Scar was already on me. With fists. The first blow hit my shoulder. The second, my jaw. I dropped to one knee. "That's it, bastard," he snarled. "Now you." I rammed the hook into his thigh. He howled, crumpled. I tore it free, and struck again, straight into his groin. "There you go, friend. A greeting from Gloria," I warned. He writhed, shrieking. I rose, grabbed his hair, slammed him against the wall, and beat his skull against the concrete until it became part of it. Silence. Blood everywhere. Mine. Theirs. Sweat. Teeth. The heat of flesh and the ice of the floor. And then, noise. 6 of them. They burst in like it was a rave party. With rifles. One with a hammer. Another with a crowbar. All armored, but none with brains. "Well, looks like our patient is back on his feet," one said, chambering around. "Warm-up's over," muttered another. I picked up the machete from the floor. Tested the balance. Felt its weight. "Well then, boys," I rasped, drenched in sweat and blood. "Who wants the first discount on cremation?" The first lunged. A bullet missed. I drove the machete into his armpit, slicing through to the spine. His scream drowned out the gunfire. The second leapt. I dodged, ripped the crowbar from his hands, and smashed it into his temple. The skull burst like an egg. One hit me from behind. I dropped, rolled, and drove the machete into his knee. He fell, and I struck again, straight into the throat. Another rushed with the hammer. I threw the machete, seized his wrist, snapped it, stole the hammer, and crushed his face with it. The last 2 pulled back. One shouted into his radio, the other tried to reload. I hurled the machete. It sank into the chest of the one screaming. And the last, he ran. But I was already there. I tore his rifle from him and emptied half the magazine into his body until he became a rag doll riddled with holes. Blood. Blood everywhere. On the floor. On the walls. On me. I stood there, barely breathing. "Well, you got your fucking bonus," I exhaled, staring at the bodies. My hands trembled. Not from fear. From overstrain. From the heat of blood that was no longer only mine. From the weight of the machete, coated with flesh and the remnants of lives not my own. The floor beneath my feet was slick, a mixture of brains, entrails, and blood that made it feel like ice crafted for maniacs. But I was not finished yet. The silence in the slaughterhouse lasted precisely 5 seconds. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Voices. The clacking of weapons. Swearing laced with orders. Curses beating like a pulse. "Where is he? Where the fuck is that psycho?" someone shouted. They said he was hanging. He was hanging on a hook. What the hell? Yeah, now he's hanging inside us. I stepped into the shadows. My eyes had already adjusted. To light. To darkness. To pain. I was a predator inside a cage they themselves had forgotten to lock. They came in. 30 men, maybe more. Some in armor. Some in tank tops. Their skin inked with tattoos where skulls were fucking dollar signs. All of them carried weapons. Machetes, brass knuckles, axes, rifles. A festive kit for swine. I watched as one of them stepped on the head of his buddy, the one I had smashed to paste with a hammer. "Well, this is a fucking mess," he muttered. "Not a mess," I told him from behind. "A prologue." And I smashed his skull into the wall. Screams, howls, gunfire. I hurled myself into the fight like a plague breaking into a school. The first, with a shotgun. I ducked under the blast, hurled the crowbar into his knee, leapt, tore the shotgun from him, and fired point blank into his jaw. The top of his head flew off like the lid of a can. The next, with a knife. He wanted it stylish. He got ugly. The butt of the rifle across his face, then the stock jammed into his throat. He gagged, and I tore his tongue out with pliers while he knelt before me. That's for the jokes about Claire, I whispered in his ear. Now stay silent forever. 3 rushed me at once. 1 grabbed my shoulder. I smashed my elbow into his temple. Another lunged with a knife. I caught his wrist, twisted it, and buried the blade into his eye. The third fired, but the bullet tore into his friend's back instead. I seized the corpse, used it as a shield, closed the distance with the shooter, and shoved the knife into his gut, slow and deliberate, savoring it. Deeper, I shouted. This isn't a search for Claire. This requires balls. The noise of the gunfire sounded muted. Adrenaline drowned out everything. I moved like a beast. Not from pain, but from rage. One of them, a brute with a sledgehammer, swung it at me. I seized a chain hanging from the ceiling, wrapped it around his throat, and pulled down hard. He thrashed, choked, pounded the hammer against the floor. I yanked tighter, and heard the snap of vertebrae. Well, feel the pressure? I whispered as he collapsed to his knees. This isn't a mortgage, bastard. This is me. The others no longer rushed. They began to retreat. Panic spread. Someone screamed. He's insane. He's unkillable. I walked slowly, picked up an axe, felt its weight. One of them tried to run. I threw it. The blade sank into his back, smashing through armor and ribs. He still tried to breathe, but wheezed like a broken vacuum cleaner. A few shots rang out. I ducked behind a counter, seized a crowbar, burst out, drove it into the shooter's face, then into another's groin. Surprise. I roared. I'm still not finished. One remained. He ran. Far, but not far enough. I caught him, grabbed his hair, hurled him to the ground. Mercy, he sobbed. I'm just a guard. Yeah. I nodded, raising the machete. Me too, guarding my home. And I drove the blade into his throat, slowly, feeling his life pour over my hands. Silence. Corpses. Meat. Emptiness. I stood, barely breathing. Spat blood. My ribs ached, my shoulder burned, but I remained upright. And then I saw him. A black SUV at the gate. The only living creature not yet claimed by this hell. A man. Fat. Bald. In a suit, though stained with filth, as though even his own body already knew he would not live to see the evening. He was a supervisor, not a fighter. A coordinator. The one who pointed, but never acted. He opened the door of the car, climbed inside. I ran. He had not even managed to fit the key into the ignition when I tore the door off and seized him by his tie. Well, hello? Carrion, I said, yanking him out. He squealed. I hurled him to the ground. Wait. I'm just what? I snarled. Just the one who watched? Who approved? Who took a cut? I grabbed his right arm, snapped it at the elbow. He screamed like a pig at slaughter. Oh God, no please. God's not on shift today, I said, and broke the left one. He screamed so loudly the crows could have mistaken it for their call to gather. I rose, raised my boot, and stamped it down hard into his groin. He howled. Where did you take Claire? I roared back, grinding my heel. I don't know. I swear. I don't know. Lies. Again. Where? I don't know exactly. They took her separately. I was only in charge of security. And where's Maxwell? I stomped him like grapes at a vineyard. Where is he, you fuck? An address, he rasped. He said, if anything happens, we meet at the safe house, in New Jersey, an old industrial site. The old freight hub, 1120 Garfield Pier, Newark. I stopped, bent down, looked into his eyes. You know, you've helped me tonight, I whispered. So your reward will be quick. Please, he sobbed. Don't. I slid the knife into his heart. Slowly, to the hilt. He gasped, choked, and was gone. I wiped my hands on his jacket, climbed into his car, started the engine. 1120 Garfield Pier, Newark, I muttered. Maxwell, I'm coming. Night had already wrapped Newark like an old blanket hiding the filth of the world beneath it. The industrial zone by the bay greeted me like a rotten tooth in the mouth of the city, hollow, damp, foul. Maxwell's old lair, 1120 Garfield Pier. Officially, an abandoned logistics hub. Unofficially, a grim fortress of metal, concrete, and human waste. There were no passers-by here. No neighbors from whom you could borrow a cup of sugar. Only flesh waiting to be sent for processing. I stopped the car in the shadow of the warehouses. Headlights had been killed long before. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Like in the basement of a serial killer, where the victim has not yet realized that the jokes are over. I stepped out and looked around. The wind tugged at the plastic ribbons and oil-stained tarpaulins. The air carried the stench of iron, sand, and death. On me was the entire arsenal I had gathered in the slaughterhouse before this. A machete, a crowbar, an assault rifle, a couple of grenades, and the silenced pistol I had taken from the dead overseer. I felt their weight like armor. Only mine reeked of blood and gunpowder. I began moving along the outer perimeter, slowly, like a crab in a swamp. At a distance I could see shadows. They were smoking, joking. One was showing something on his phone, another was pissing behind a barrel. Nearby, cameras, floodlights, sensors. They guarded with too much confidence, as if they believed death itself was afraid to peer through their windows at night. The first were two men at the back entrance. One was telling some story about a whore in Atlantic City. The other laughed, spitting into a puddle. I came right up to them, and only when they heard my steps had I already driven the machete into the first one's throat. The second tried to bolt, but I seized him by the collar and smashed his skull against a steel container until his brains decorated the metal. I stripped them quickly. Armor, radios, a couple of knives. One even had brass knuckles hidden in his boot. Cute. Added it to the collection. I moved on. At the next corner 2 guards were discussing Bitcoin and someone's mother. One yawned, leaning against the wall. Sorry, boys, I whispered. You're urgently needed in hell. HR wants a word. I tossed a grenade at their feet. PSHHH. Boom. Blood painted the wall. One of the bodies groaned, but not for long. I walked over, drove a knife into his throat, whether to spare him or to keep him from relaxing. Even I wasn't sure. They were starting to notice. Static and short cries ran through the radios. But I was already in shark mode. I smelled them. I struck. The next patrol had dogs. 2 hounds. Good animals. Not their fault their bastard masters had chosen the side of filth. Go on, boys. This isn't your fight, I whispered, tossing them a piece of sausage from the guard's pocket, while I circled behind. The first, knife in the ear. The second, a burst from the rifle into the gut. The dogs broke free of their leashes and ran off, tails wagging. Good boys, I nodded after them. Smarter than the bitches I'm cutting here. I reached the guard shack. Inside, 2 men. Cameras, a surveillance console, a laptop. One was picking his teeth with a knife, the other scrolling through a porn site. Gentlemen, what? No news series anymore, I said, stepping through the door. They turned. One managed to shout, what the foo, before I smashed his face with the stock. The other reached for his pistol, too late. I rammed the crowbar into him, dragged it down. He collapsed, wheezing like a kettle on its last breath. I shut down the cameras, cut the cables. No alarm. Which meant someone had skimped on security. Good. Cheap bastards die funnier. Next, the hangar. Lit up. Open. Ringed with guards. Crates. Vehicles. Barrels inside. Among them, the watchmen. Some with shotguns, some with AKs. One with an RPG, seriously? Against one man? Well then, hero, I told myself. There was never an ounce of common sense in your life. No point starting now. I took down the guard on the edge, quieter than a hungover mouse. Took his knife, hurled it into the next one. It lodged in his eye with a crack. The others screamed. I threw a smoke grenade. Flash. Panic. Screams. Where is he? The bastards in the smoke. Shoot. I burst out of the mist like a ghost. Shooting. Striking. The machete took off a hand, the rifle a face. One lunged at me with rebar. He got a burst in the chest, dropped to his knees whispering mama. I helped him, a bullet in the forehead, and rest. A grenade into the cluster of pigs. Boom. Shards, guts, smoke, roar. From the side someone screamed. He's here. I threw a knife. Right into his mouth. Silent now, bastard. One with a machete wanted a duel. He approached, swinging like a pirate on LSD. Go on then, I said. Show mama why you didn't make ballet. I ducked, smashed his knee, then his throat. He gurgled, and I drove his own blade into his chest. That's your ticket to hell. No baggage. They ran. hid. But I was everywhere. In every shadow. In every scream. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was cleansing this cesspit as if it were my own bathroom, and mildew had colonized the tiles with hell. The last of them tried to crawl under a truck. Please, he whimpered. I have children. Good, I said. One bastard less. More chance your kids grow up normal. I stamped on his neck. Crack. Silence. I straightened. Breathed. Blood dripped from my hands, my face, the machete. I looked around the perimeter. Bodies. Piles of them. Some still twitching, some lying still as morgue furniture. Well, Maxwell, I whispered. I'm already at your door. Hope you've prepared a speech. Tonight's meeting is without ties. The outer perimeter, cleared. They were waiting inside. Packed. Armed like they were going to war with God. The whole facility had been turned into a labyrinth. Crates, corridors of shelving, half-closed hangars with weapons, explosives, surveillance cameras. But they'd made one mistake. They forgot that a man who has come for his daughter is no longer a man. He is a storm. I entered through a side door. Quiet. The first one got the rifle butt to the throat. He fell without realizing he was dead. The second took a silenced round to the temple. I moved quickly, without sound, until the alarm rose. It's him. Richard, someone screamed, dropping his rifle. He's alive. Yeah, bastard, and I'm angry. I replied, tossing a grenade at 3 of them at once. Flash. Explosion. Flame. Flesh spattering the walls like wallpaper from hell. They swarmed me. But I was everywhere. Cutting, shooting, hurling. One lunged with a knife. I caught his wrist, shoved the blade into his eye, ripped it free, and threw it into another. The rifle flew from the enemy's hands. I caught it and unleashed a burst. Bullets sheared through bodies like a can opener through tin. One tried hiding behind a crate. Bad choice. It was full of TNT. Good luck at your new job, I said, tossing another grenade inside. Boom. The blast tore part of the wall away. Fire licked the ceiling. The blaze spread. Some screamed, some prayed, some fired blindly. It didn't stop me. He's fucking invincible. No, I'm just really angry. I roared, swinging the machine gun. Bullets shredded everything. Bodies, crates, lamps. Glass rained, metal shrieked. One of them, running, clipped a fuel tank. A spark. Explosion. Half the warehouse engulfed in fire. I leapt forward, into the smoke. Machete in hand, rifle slung across my back. I killed anything that moved. One shot me. In the shoulder. I roared and rammed the knife into his mouth, slashing to the ear. They tried escaping, stumbling, screaming. Help. Too late. I barked after them. By the time I'm merciful, everyone's already ashes. In the distance, a silhouette. Maxwell. Running. A pathetic lump in an expensive suit, soaked in sweat and terror. He was racing for the car. I surged after him, lightning through the storm. He only managed to open the door. No. I grabbed his collar, yanked him out, slammed him onto the asphalt. He gasped, crawled backward. Where is she? I roared, snapping his right arm. The crack was sweet. I don't know. I don't know anyth. The left arm. Crack. Screech. He nearly sang. Where is Claire? Where is my daughter, filth? I can make a deal. I'll give you the brothel's address. It's in the Bronx, 911 Brook Avenue. Please, don't kill me. We can. Oh, don't worry. I won't kill you. You'll manage that yourself. I found a rope, tied his legs, fastened it to the car's bumper. He howled. No, you can't. Of course I can. I don't even have a license. Fair game. I got behind the wheel. Engine roared. Gas pedal down. Maxwell's body dragged across the asphalt, shrieking like a terrified tractor. And then, her. Gloria. She ran out right in front of the car. In her hands, a rifle. Screaming. Stop. Stop, you bastard. I'll shoot you. I didn't slow. Sorry, darling. But as always, you've chosen the wrong time to interfere. A bullet ricocheted off the hood. Nearby, a reservoir. The shot hit metal. Spark. Explosion. Gloria went up like a Christmas tree. She shrieked. Flames devoured her as she fired blindly, sightless. I plowed into her at full speed. Let's stir the coals. I roared, smashing into her burning body. She shot upward like a firework and fell into the blazing pyre. Behind me, Maxwell shrieked and howled and shook in terror. I swung the car around with a sharp, cinematic jerk, as if I were inside an action movie. His body slammed into a burning tree. Maxwell, meet nature. That's a maple. And that, I sneered, is your end. An explosion. Carnage. Flesh. Flame. I didn't look back. I was driving for my daughter. The address of the brothel was etched into my brain as though it had been branded there with a hot iron. 911, Brook Avenue, Bronx. A damned infernal address. I drove toward it so fast that even the devil himself would have begged me to slow down. A dark streak of blood and Maxwell's remains still stretched across the asphalt behind the car, but I refused to dwell on it. I had only one goal. I slowed a block before the building. The usual layer of filth, neon signs, fogged windows, a shadowed entrance. From inside came the pounding of cheap bass, laughter, shouting, all of it blending into one nauseating chorus. This place wasn't a brothel, it was a meat grinder. I stepped out, checked my weapons. Rifle slung across my shoulder, machete at my side, pistol tucked in my belt, a pair of grenades stuffed in my pockets. My hands still ached from the earlier fights, but they knew how to hold steel. Well then, I muttered to myself, Daddy's come to visit, and I kicked the door open. Inside it reeked of cheap whiskey, sweat, and fear. Girls sat in the corners, some in handcuffs, others with eyes so empty they seemed already dead. But the guards were more than plentiful. The first rushed at me with a baseball bat. I caught his motion and drove the machete into his gut. He doubled over, and I struck again. Blood sprayed the walls like a fountain. The second fired. A bullet grazed my shoulder. I dropped behind a table, flipped it over, and tossed a grenade. The blast tore 3 of them apart at once. Chunks of meat splattered the ceiling. One of the girls screamed. Quiet, ladies, I said. Cleanup's on me. Then they swarmed. One with a knife. I slit his throat and used his body as a shield. Another with a pistol. I emptied a burst into his face. A third with brass knuckles smashed me across the jaw, but I rammed the crowbar beneath his ribs and twisted until he went silent. They shouted, calling for reinforcements, but I was faster. I shot the chandelier loose. It crashed down on 2 men at once. One managed to crawl free, but I hurled the machete. He looked like a gutted fish the moment it hit. Welcome to my restaurant. I grinned, picking up the fallen rifle. Today's special is entrails. In the corner, one bastard grabbed a girl and pressed a knife to her throat. Stop, bastard. I'll kill her, he screamed. I stepped closer, locking eyes with him. Do it, I smirked. Then I'll cut off your balls and feed them to your friends. He faltered. The girl jerked, and I fired. The bullet punched through his eye. His head burst like an overripe watermelon. The girl collapsed screaming, but she was alive. Then the real slaughter began. I hurled grenades into rooms, shot through corridors, carved with the machete anyone who dared step near. Bullets whined through the air. The walls shuddered under blasts. Kill him, they shouted. Too late, boys. You're already dead, you just don't know it yet. I answered, mowing them down with a machine gun I'd picked up in the armory. Fire consumed the building. Smoke suffocated, flames roared. But I kept moving forward. I heard the cries of the captive girls. They came from the basement. I stormed in, smashed the locks, cut down the last guards who tried hiding behind human shields. They squealed, but I butchered them without hesitation. The crack of their bones drowned out their pleas. And there among them, her, Daddy, they wanted to sell me to some bastard tonight. Claire was trembling, her eyes swollen from tears, but she was alive. I dropped to my knees, wrapped her in my arms. It's over, sweetheart, it's over, I whispered. I'm here. I've got you. No one will ever dare touch you again. The other girls looked at me with terror and hope. I cut their chains. Go. All of you. Outside. Take any car you want. The keys are on the dead. Run, and don't look back. We stepped out. The brothel was a furnace, its roof collapsing, its windows exploding one after another. Flames lit the night sky. I led Claire to the car. Daddy, will they come after us again? She asked, still trembling. I looked back at the building crumbling in fire. Ammunition crates detonated, bricks tumbled, the roof caved in. No, darling. These ones, never again. We drove away. Weeks passed. I found an old stable outside the city. Half ruined, overgrown with weeds. Claire and I brought it back to life. We fixed the roof, scraped away the filth, set new planks. We bought horses. Real, strong, beautiful creatures. Now every morning began not with the stench of blood and smoke, but with the scent of hay and the sound of hoofs. Claire laughed as she rode, her hair flying in the wind, and once more I saw in her the girl she was always meant to be, happy, not a victim. We dined at a wooden table. I sometimes joked, "Claire, imagine this, your father is a farmer now. From killer to stable hand. Next step, baking pies." She laughed. Sometimes she grew sad, but I always reminded her. We survived, and those who stood against us did not. That's all the arithmetic that matters. And so we lived. Together. Far from the screams, the gunfire, the betrayals. I knew the past would always burn somewhere behind our backs, but ahead of us stretched peace. A world where I was once again simply a father. A world where Claire could laugh again. A world where even after hell, a quiet paradise could be found in an old stable.